Go. Oh, he's still doing it. Live from New York, but Nick is in Las Vegas. It's the show that is jam-packed with late-breaking NFL news to the point that we changed the entire rundown several times. We're starting in the NFL. Sam Darnold headed to Seattle, 3 years, around $110 million, $55 million guaranteed. Oh, 100.5. It's late-breaking news. I thought it was 110. It's around 100.5. $55 million guaranteed. Here's how Sam did in the regular season with the Vikings. Had the third best record, had the fifth most passing yards, fifth most touchdowns at 35, passer rating at 102, and he had that a ton of 100-point passer rating games. 20-yard completions, a lot of them to Justin Jefferson. He had 62 of them. That was the NFL's best. So, Brew, your reaction to Sam Darnold to the Seahawks?
Well, I don't think this changes any fortunes for Seattle, but considering the numbers, $55 million guaranteed, 3 years, $100 million, I can live with that. That's a number where you certainly can put pieces around it. They already have Jackson Smith and Jigma, pretty good running game, Kenneth Walker. So I think that's fine. I've said all along that I would not give big money. If I were another team, I would not give big money to Sam Darnold. They didn't give, relatively speaking, big money to him, but it's enough to keep him happy. It's kind of like the Baker Mayfield situation. Right. Baker had the one good year in Tampa Bay, and they rewarded him with a similar contract. So I'm fine with it because of the numbers, Nick. I'll be interested. If he has a great year this year, then I'll really be impressed, and I'll start giving him some props. He was great last year, but I thought he was in a great situation. He won't have that benefit this year, so it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, and it is almost identical to the Baker deal, but it comes a year after the Baker deal. So when you kind of adjust for the NFL salary cap inflation, it is in the current market a better bargain than the Baker deal, which it should be because he's not as good of a quarterback as Baker Mayfield, and I don't think he's as good of a quarterback as Geno Smith. So I know he had a better year last year than Geno Smith. Seattle, this is a little puzzling to me. I think they pretty clearly just got worse at quarterback. Now, I know they got a second-round pick in the moving off Geno Smith's, and that is valuable. But it feels to me like this is a mistake teams make a little too often, which is falling in love with a guy who had a great game against you. The last great Sam Darnold moment, maybe the greatest Sam Darnold moment of his career, was the game against Seattle. That was where he made the best throw of his career. That was when he kind of thrusted himself into the edges of the MVP conversation. And so it feels to me like, and I understand the new offensive coordinator there, Clint Kubiak, they feel like he is going to, that Darnold maybe can run his scheme well, is I guess what I've read. I just think Geno Smith obviously has a much better body of work. I think he's a better player. He also, both of them have only been in one career playoff game. They both lost, but Geno in his playoff game at least acquitted himself fine, and he was clearly at a massive disadvantage playing the number one defense in the league, San Francisco, a few years ago, and that wasn't the case for Darnold. So I don't understand Seattle's rationale here. I understand why Vegas wanted Geno because Pete Carroll's there. When I saw that Seattle was moving on from Lockett, moving on from Metcalf, moving on from Geno, I said, oh, okay, they're doing a kind of a quick turnaround rebuild, maybe looking quarterback in the draft or maybe looking bridge guy. This isn't really a bridge contract, so this is a little puzzling to me, KW.
Nick, I don't hate your Geno's better than Darnold take. I tend to agree with that. At least Geno's shown more of a capability to kind of carry a team without being in the ideal circumstances. Not that he's elite, but he has shown he can carry you to some degree. Darnold's never shown that. The one thing I will give Darnold, though, against Geno is this. We know what Geno is. We know exactly what Geno is, which is a good quarterback, right? But he's not going to be elite. Darnold, I guess, obviously Shanahan liked him, talked highly of him when he was in San Francisco. Last year, he did play at an elite level, but for the last 2 games. And so there is at least a thought out there, or the possibility that, hey, this guy was a strong-arm guy coming out of college. Everybody loved him, and now he's finally reaching his potential. So theoretically, the ceiling is higher for Darnold. We'll see if that actually is the case.
I think the Seahawks have a little bit of Geno Smith upgrade. All right, we got one of the Jets draft picks who is now kind of hitting his peak after a rough ride. Why don't we can just replicate what we have with Geno? The team that I want to focus on, Nick, is the Vikings. And I know you're not high on Sam Darnold, but I think this contract is not huge. It's not something the Vikings couldn't do. To look at 14 wins, and we've seen the 14 wins, 4,000 passing yards. I know I'm blue in the face with this graphic, but these are great quarterbacks all time. So the fact that I'm not saying it's hubris from the Vikings organization, but the idea that you can just look at 14 wins and 4,000 passing yards and say, like, you know what, it wasn't him, it was actually us, I think could come back to bite them. Do you buy that?
Okay. No, I mean, not really. And, Brew, I want to tell you something. You're off the hook now, buddy. Because we now when viewers or podcast listeners, as Wilds likes to, remind us that we have, think of the worst repeated first things first graphic. They no longer are going to think of the Jimmy G graphic of lore. They're going to think of this
Josh, is there an error on the graphic?
No, it's true. It's just like the Jimmy G graphic was true. It was true, but it is so absurd when you look at it that it almost feels like it almost proves the inverse of your point, which is, well, we are looking at 6 no doubt first ballot Hall of Famers, or in Rodgers and Mahomes' case, future, and Brady, I guess, future first ballot Hall of Famers. Yeah. We're looking at, 5 of the 10 greatest quarterbacks ever. Kurt Warner's right on the fringe there probably. And then 2 guys last year. In the same year, same guys, none of whom think they are the best player on their own team. So that's the first point. The second point is, even remove that graphic from it, I think you, Wilds, are under, and maybe this is one where you're right and the teams are wrong, and I say that sincerely, but you are not putting the value on having spent a first-round pick on a player that teams do. No. When the Vikings spent a first-round pick on J.J. McCarthy, he has to be their starter within the first 2 years. They wanted him to be the starter the first year. Like in the modern NFL, nobody is sitting 2 years, particularly a guy that they thought was going to start year 1. And so I think that anything short of, a deep playoff run, maybe even a Super Bowl, anything short of a Super Bowl appearance, this was going to be Darnold's fate. The difference, I think, was if he had played better in the playoffs, in the one playoff game, maybe they would have franchised him and then traded him. But I think they understood if we franchise him at $40 million, that he might not be tradable. And there might not be someone willing to give us anything where it's worth tying up that much of our cap. So I don't, you call it hubris. I call it a team saying we're okay risking a lower floor because we are chasing a higher ceiling. The same way after a 13-win season with Kirk Cousins, they shortly thereafter drafted a quarterback in the first round.
Yeah, the fact is this, and they knew this. They weren't that close with Sam Darnold, right? They were really, right. 14, it seems like it with the 14 wins, and it was a great regular season, but we saw what happened when the games mattered, Detroit, and then in the playoffs, and they didn't play well at all. 18 points in the last 2 games combined. That offense fell apart. So they weren't close. If they had brought back Sam Darnold, I don't know if anybody would have considered them a strong threat to win the NFC. And like you said, Nick, they had done it with Kirk Cousins, essentially the same thing. So they're going with J.J. McCarthy clearly, right? They're not bringing in an Aaron Rodgers or anybody like that. They're going with McCarthy, and, they liked what they saw from him last year until he got hurt. So even if they do, they won't win 14 games. I don't see that happening. Maybe they'll make the playoffs, but even if they take the step back, they feel better about their future.
All right, to do a rebuild for no reason.
What were they going to do with Darnold?
14 wins. It's 14 wins.
And you got blasted in the first round of
all the
game
teams
of the
got blasted. The Commanders got blasted.
The Rams didn't get blasted.
The Commanders got blasted.
They won playoff games first, though.
Brew, damn straight. Yeah, I mean, it's one. It's getting blasted. Yes, after winning multiple playoff games is different than getting blasted in your first playoff game. But Wilds, before we move on, let me just turn it on its head a bit. Could it not be that? Because let's say J.J. McCarthy has a setback with his knee, or let's say J.J. McCarthy doesn't look as good, in the offseason or whatever it is. Is there not maybe the logic of our system? Our coach, our skill players got career year Kirk Cousins, career year Sam Darnold. So if we do end up having another stopgap year with Daniel Jones, why can't we get career year Daniel Jones?
Okay, that's fair. I mean, I guess so.
You're looking at it as, if you're the Vikings, what is to me more likely? That Darnold all of a sudden became a drastically better player than he once was, or that offensive system, personnel, talent, all of it is going to get the most out of even middling ability players. Because and I know Greg's not out yet, like Daniel Jones had a better career than Darnold up until last year.
Okay.
So I don't think they look at it as,
I agree.
as risky as you look at it.
I think that's fair. I just, my antennas go up anytime the coach in the system takes precedent over the players. All right, moving on to the Jets' new quarterback, Justin Fields. 2 years, $40 million. That's a very reasonable deal. So Aaron Rodgers out, Justin Fields in. Remember, he split snaps with Russ, started off 4-2. Had some pretty good numbers. Brew, what do you think about Justin Fields to the New York Jets?
I'm fine with this. Obviously, the Jets are essentially starting over. Even if you had brought back Aaron Rodgers, you weren't winning anything of significance. I mean, at best, and this is a long shot, you would have made the playoffs and gotten bounced early. So you're building your own culture, Aaron Glenn, and Justin Fields can grow with this coaching staff. I also think, obviously, they wanted Fields, and they're going to build the offense to his strengths. He's never really had that. Obviously, it wasn't the case last year in Pittsburgh. So I think they'll build it around his strengths, which obviously is running the ball. But he's going to have to throw it better. There's no doubt about it. You don't want to waste a Garrett Wilson. And if Wilson isn't getting the ball like he should, then he will unjustifiably get frustrated. All right, he has been in New York with these middling to bad quarterbacks his entire career. And I wouldn't blame him for getting frustrated. So Justin Fields, we obviously know he can run the football. He's going to have to throw it better, and they'll give him the whole chance. And to grow in New York with Garrett Wilson, it's not a bad move because obviously they're a team that's in rebuild mode.
And remember, Brew, the last time Justin Fields looked great throwing the football was at Ohio State with Garrett Wilson. So, there is that where it's like, okay, they have a connection. They've played, they have a relationship to a degree. I understand Garrett Wilson at that point was a younger Garrett Wilson, but both were younger, but he was early in his collegiate career. And so this to me is more about Aaron Glenn trying to make it clear, put the Jets in a position where they don't have to reach on a quarterback in the first round. Now, maybe if they love either Shedeur or Jackson Dart, who could be their pick, maybe they take him anyway. And Justin Fields in a quarterback competition. Fields' age and draft pedigree are really the things he has going for him. It's very, very difficult for me to sit here and say you can rely on him as a passer because at no point in his NFL career has he displayed that. And even last year, in Pittsburgh, when he was playing some of his best football, Mike Tomlin, a coach we all have immense respect for, was adamant and convinced and steadfast that the better option was an aging, middling Russell Wilson, and he had as much information as anybody could have. So I like this a lot more than them staying with Aaron Rodgers. They obviously were the one team that couldn't go after Sam Darnold because that just wouldn't make sense. So they didn't. I wouldn't have liked Russell Wilson there. I think having as odd as this sounds, non-celebrity, non-highly drafted, non-quarterback, draft savior in New York could be good for him. Because if you look at really the last decade, whether it was Darnold or Zach or Aaron, the story of the Jets was always really the story of the quarterback. Now it doesn't have to be that, as Justin Fields can kind of just be a supporting actor in the movie, so to speak. And I think that's probably good for what Aaron Glenn's trying to put together. So you don't like it, Wilds?
No, so he leaves the Bears. I'm big on prove-it years, right? Baker had a prove-it year with the Bucs, and he proved it.
Yeah.
A little bit rubbed me the wrong way about Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold took the reins, had a prove-it year, won 14 games, and they're like, nah, we didn't like it. Justin Fields had a prove-it year. It kind of worked out in his favor. No one likes to have sort of a battlefield promotion, but Russ got hurt. So he had the chance to take the job, keep the job in his prove-it year, and we don't know. I don't know what was proven, Brood. Is that fair? Like, your prove-it year, you kind of proved it, I guess, against.
He did prove that you could win with him, or at least, win to a certain degree. He was 4-2, and so he proved that. I think the Steelers had Russ penciled in as their starter no matter what, unless, Justin had gone out there and just lit the world on fire. Russ was going to get the chance to be the starter, and he did. And I think he was better than Justin last year, in fairness. But I thought Justin bought himself some more time, Wilds. If he had gone out there and played poorly, he would not have gotten this contract. So he did buy himself some time and create the perception out there that, maybe this guy can do something. And again, Sam Darnold, Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield. We are looking at a lot of guys who have resurrected themselves after slow starts to their career, and I'm sure that's what the Jets are thinking with Justin. And we know he's got it with the legs; he's just got to prove it with the arm.
And this is also Darnold a year ago, when he was brought in to be a backup, got 1 year, $10 million. So I think in comparison, when we see the other positions contracts, this feels like a lot of money. But $20 million a year for a quarterback is essentially the gap between a high-paid backup and the lowest-paid starters in the league.
Yeah.
So I don't really look at this. I don't look at him as, even with this deal, the guaranteed, he's probably overwhelming likely, but the guaranteed starter. And it certainly is the way I think it's structured, where they can walk away after 1 year. Right. This is essentially a 1 year deal with a team option for the second year. If it hits, great. If it doesn't, they figured they'd be looking for a quarterback anyway. And this is as cheap as you are going to get a quarterback who might be your starter, other than by drafting one. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get more from the show and to check out clips from other shows on FS1.